Hey everyone, Giovanni Chavez, president of the California Young Democrats, and I'm very, very honored that we have a special guest today, Jack Cocchiarella, who has over 800,000 subscribers on YouTube, very prominent in the content creator community. And this is kind of something new we're trying out, right? Usually the Young Democrats on off years, we organize, we build our membership, and on election years, we canvass, right? And that doesn't mean we're not going to do that, but now I think in social media, we're seeing the MAGA extremist right wing dominate social media. 9 out of 10 of the top podcasts are right leaning. We're seeing a lot, the algorithm push right wing content. A lot of young men have turned to the Republican Party. And I don't think we can afford to just sit back and only organize on the ground, right? That is important, but we have to combat them on social media, digitally. We have to get innovative with how we combat them. And who better to do that than the guy who's doing it himself, Jack? So with that being said, Jack, feel free to introduce yourself and take it away.
Yeah, thank you so much for the kind intro. And I want to start with two things that you just said there that have been on my mind a lot lately. The first being about organizing, right? You come from that space, you know that we have to be on the ground all the time. And I've been preaching this to folks for years now with social media, that it's the same with the digital organizing, right? If we just turn out and start appearing on a couple shows here and there, and you may be doing one or two podcasts and only focusing on for as much as I love MSNBC, but only just going on MSNBC, we're not reaching people enough. And so this online organizing has to be a year-round practice, and that takes investment, that takes focus, that takes partnership with not just only, folks who are elected, not just folks at the DNC, but what's been so great is you've seen all these very successful creators, the Brian Tyler Cohens, the Midas Touch, David Pakman. We're all going on each other's shows. We're trying to uplift. We've seen so much growth recently in the liberal media sphere online that really makes me feel positive about what we're building. And you also talked about young men, and something that was both concerning but maybe a little positive is a poll that I just saw. I think it was this Yale poll of young voters that had guys who were about 18 to 21, about plus 18 for Trump. But then if you go 22 to about 25, that's a little closer to, in the positive 10 to 15 points for Democrats. I think what that represents is, sure, the younger half of Gen Z of our generation is swinging to the right. And I think we're going to be able to combat that. But what it also tells me is people who are breaking into the job market right now, my friends who are about to graduate in a couple of weeks, couple of days, like myself, we are realizing just how badly Donald Trump is screwing our generation. So anyone who had this false positive perception of a Trump economy that was really Barack Obama's economy, that is all going away. So while I do think we need to be able to communicate in these cultural spaces with young people, and I don't know how good of a job I've done introducing myself, but this is the stuff I like to talk about. I think Donald Trump is actually going to do a lot of work for us in shifting people back towards the Democrats with just the way that he has screwed really an entire generation with a self-made, self-inflicted recession.
Yep.
So I don't know if that's the most positive spin on it, but that is currently a lot of what I'm observing with younger people, and why it is so important for us to start messaging, us to be in as many spaces as possible. I don't know if folks saw Pete Buttigieg recently doing a couple of podcast appearances and more right-leaning cultural spaces. A lot of these places, as much as they appear right-leaning to us, to the audience, they kind of come across as apolitical. That's kind of the mask, or how so many who are Trump backing, who will kind of carry water for Republicans all the time, like to frame themselves, because they think if they say that they're moderate, it gives them credibility. But they're using that credibility to just defend every action of Republicans. But what we have to do is we have to go into those spaces. We have to present ourselves as just people willing to have these conversations, which of course Pete Buttigieg always is. That is his truth. And we just need to talk to people. As much as we may dislike a lot of things that they say, some of their audiences aren't there for politics. They just bump into them because they're talking about cultural issues all the time. We as Democrats need to hone in on those. We need to find those issues where, like I talked about with that year-round digital organizing, where we have issues where people who are having apolitical conversations, like they are right now about tariffs or Trump crashing the economy. Sure, that's inherently political. But when you're talking about the chaos and the disruption around you, you're just talking about life. We need to make sure that when people think about how government actually works, in their mind, they're picturing a Democrat. And that is, again, that year-round digital media organizing that we are doing right now. So that's a bit of my intro. That's a bit of my shtick. That's a bit of the stuff I'm thinking about all the time.
Absolutely. Thank you. And couldn't have said it better myself. And just for folks that are coming in or probably don't know the formats of this, Jack has a presentation he's going to give us. And then after that, we really want this to be a dialogue. We want folks to get their questions answered. So after that, we're going to have a Q&A for folks to ask some questions. So feel free to take it away whenever you're ready.
Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing this presentation. I just sent you a request. I am so bad with tech, so hopefully this all goes smoothly. I think it will. But everyone, if you could just give me a little bit of understanding that this may not run super perfectly. I think it will, though. I think we will be more than fine. So this is a presentation that I've been giving to elected Democrats on the Hill. I've been going, I'm currently a student at Columbia. Like I said, I'm about to be graduating in a couple of weeks. So I'm very excited that I'll get to dedicate myself to my work entirely. But I've been traveling down to Washington from New York to talk to elected officials on the Hill, to talk to Democrats in Congress, elected Democrats all across the country about what they can be doing to reach people a little bit better. So I have a slideshow presentation that I think is just kind of maybe an interesting spotlight into what we're talking about. Maybe it's not broadly applicable to all as everyone on this call, but it's stuff that I think is interesting that I want to be going through. So whenever you're bumping into people who are in elected office, the people who should be serving you, if you want to talk to them about social media, what they're doing to communicate, you surely can. So again, I'm a YouTube personality. That's what I do. I like to talk about politics on YouTube, and it is somehow taken off in the way that it has. Something that I'm very clear about with our folks, though, is that we want to make sure that as I do, their thumbnails are as interesting as possible. I don't know how many of y'all spend any time on YouTube, but if you do, that's the number one thing that's caught your eye. So, I talked to maybe Cory Booker's team about how it might be interesting. As you see that thumbnail, the top left is the back of his head. We'd rather see his face, and it performs a little bit better on YouTube when you do. So these are the type of little small things that we work on, and we want to be making sure that we can be having more success with. At the same time, I'm always telling folks, you have this content, package it up, put it out. YouTube is a great platform to be doing so. You can connect all your stuff. So I've really been encouraging of sharing YouTube Shorts. It's just another way for people to break through a little bit. At the same time, I don't know how many of y'all still are on Twitter or Blue Sky. Either way, I've been talking about the same sort of packaging where you want to make sure that ideas that we're putting forth as Democrats, they're clear, they're concise. I feel like a lot of what we've done in the past is put out big memos. We're all worried about the very specific language that we're using. There's been a little bit of a fight recently on whether we should be using the word oligarchy. I think we should be using the words that we feel comfortable with, that we talk about every day, and that makes sense to people who are consuming what we're talking about. And that's something that I've tried to communicate. And also just making sure our ideas appear as interesting and visually appealing as possible, because it does go far on social media. This is something that I've tried to express to some folks when talking about how they can have a bit of a better approach on Instagram, a platform where, in fact, Democrats actually do perform better than Republicans. That's the same on Instagram. That's the same on TikTok as well. I don't know how many of y'all are consuming your news on those platforms primarily. Unfortunately, we are obviously at a disadvantage on Twitter because of Elon Musk, on YouTube as well, because of a lot of the infrastructure that's already been built there. But Instagram is a platform that we're able to have success on. So I've been communicating as much as we possibly can to have an approach to sharing our message that is very concentrated on making it broadly appealing to people who I always describe as those who aren't reaching out for their politics, but maybe bumping into them. So we want to make sure that as I tell these folks, you kind of have some aesthetic appeal to what you're presenting. And there's a fun little recent feature that you can use on Instagram where you can put music that kind of tracks with the message of the post that you're making. So I had the sound of silence on my inauguration day post about the horrible things that had happened in Donald Trump's return to the White House, just a kind of added way to make sure that we're communicating our message a little better. And at the same time, I've been communicating to Democrats that we need to be doing more collaborations. We all are sharing the same message. Let's make sure we're amplifying it together. And I've been really excited to see there's a lot of Democrats in Congress, especially in the House now, who are kind of interchangeably sitting down on a show together. They're talking daily about what's happening in the inner workings of Congress, what message Democrats are trying to communicate, what we're trying to fight back against. And we've seen a lot more collaborations from members and sharing their message. And I think that amplification is so important. And I want them to be on other platforms. That's why I'm telling them to get on TikTok. There's so many people who are out there that we can reach as long as we are making sure that we are putting stuff up on those platforms. I feel like we shy away too often of sharing a message just because we don't think that we're really going to be able to break through that. Oh, how many people would this appeal to? But as is the case with a lot of the conversations we're having around what issues we want to be speaking about. I know a lot of folks are mostly focused on communicating the disaster that has been this tariff plan, if we can even call it that. But I think we should be talking about everything all the time if it is important to us. That's something that I've tried to communicate as well. These are some little Twitter tricks that I've been talking to folks about. Maybe not as interesting, but what might be is the way that I've tried to help folks learn a little bit more about how to communicate in a way that is suitable and has a little bit more success on the internet. So you might see people holding their phone like they're talking on FaceTime. That's something I always tell our members to do, that it is a little bit more visually appealing, that it feels more authentic. If you're just having a conversation, that if it's not all staged and set up and not everything has to be perfect, I worry about that a lot, that we feel like we're restricted by our own idea of what communication needs to look like. I feel like if we empower folks to kind of have the freedom of movement, to feel comfortable getting in front of a camera, whether or not it looks great, whether or not it sounds great, hopefully the substance of what you're saying is most important. But I want Democrats to feel free to just get in front of a camera whenever they can, talk to their constituents, talk to us all. I know you guys are paying attention so much. That's why you're here. You want to know how Democrats are in this fight. And that's something that I've been encouraging as much as possible. Just get in front of the camera. There's nothing wrong if you're shooting in your car. Congresswoman Sarah Jacobs is a great example of this. She is one of the few Democrats in Congress who can get her makeup on while she is communicating about what's happening. And I've told her that she is a rock star because of that. I couldn't imagine being able to do that and manage everything in the car, but it's just a good insight into their lives. And this is something that I've been trying to communicate, that the right, presents themselves as these regular, really, regular people in their approach to social media, that it's Democrats who are strange and out of touch. But these are people who are focused on, examining like who gets to go into what bathroom in a middle school, and people who want to be in your bedroom and in your family room. Like Mike Johnson monitors what his son is watching, like late at night. I don't want to say what exactly that is, but like these are people who are weird. Tim Walz said it so perfectly. We need to communicate that and show our authenticity online. That's something I've been talking about as much as I possibly can. And another thing I've been saying is a couple of do nots, and I'm going to run through these a little quickly. Something that I don't want people to do is ramble, right? Let's get to the point. Let's be straightforward. I know there's a lot of important thoughts that we want to talk about, but we just got to get straight into them. Another point that I said right there, that's that third line. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. I think this is actually something that Republicans have a lot of success with, is sometimes they do it on purpose. And I call it this type of insanity immersion, right? Where they say something so crazy, so absurd. Donald Trump does this all the time, that the media fixates on it and they play it again and again and again. And when eventually kind of they sane wash it, as we see, as CNN do all the time, and Donald Trump says that he's going to eliminate income tax entirely and he's going to pay for everything with tariffs. Just an absurd nonsense statement from a stupid person, right? They'll eventually play that a couple of times, but they'll sane wash it down to, Trump wants to have a new approach to how we do taxation and, lowering your taxes. And if a normal person bumps into that without seeing the clip, they might actually take it seriously. And so I don't want Democrats necessarily saying crazy stuff, but I feel like sometimes we don't recognize that on a day like it was the joint address to Congress, when all the Democratic senators had the same script in a video that they put out. Everyone had the same script. We were all talking about the same thing, and that is that Republicans are going to cut Medicaid. That's what they want to do. 600 to 900 billion dollars in cuts to Medicaid. And Democrats all stayed on script and they all pushed it out in this big campaign. And Republicans went nuts. They freaked out. They said, "Oh, Democrats, they have the same messaging. They're on the same script. They can't think outside the box." And what happened was those videos were played again and again and again on Fox. So the Fox audience were hearing about Democrats talking about Republicans wanting to cut Medicaid. So, in what some viewed as a mistake, we were actually able to get our messaging out more onto different platforms. And so I think it's okay to feel comfortable with that because do you know who the person that they say makes mistakes the most is? Jasmine Crockett, being authentic. They play her all the time for millions of viewers on Fox. And do you know what? I think she's probably changing some of their minds. So it's something that I've been stressing as much as possible. There's a lot of nitty gritty in social media, but really authenticity is what is going to break out most. And I don't know if you all agree with that, but I think that that's what we need to see more from Democrats who are feeling comfortable with communicating as much as they can all the time. It's why I tell them to get a little microphone and just run with it. Just feel like you're able to talk. You are an elected representative. You represent hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people in your district. Be a leader. You should be talking all the time. That is what we need to see more of. That is what I've been communicating. And I hope, I don't know how much any of y'all are maybe going to want to go out and be a social media superstar yourself, but I hope a little bit of that presentation that I give on the Hill is a little bit interesting.
Thank you so much, Jack. And I'd be remiss if I didn't, give a shout out to a couple of our folks here. Obviously, we have Young Dem chapters. I see Long Beach is in the house. UC Irvine is in the house. We got Orange County Young Democrats, Los Angeles Young Democrats, Fresno Young Democrats, and we have some of our DNC members here too. Deborah Cunningham Skurnick, Jason Park, the first Gen Z DNC member in California, by the way, and our regional director Jeff Kortson, Dennis, and assembly delegate to the California Democratic Party. So we got a lot of party leaders in the House. I wanted to give them a shout out, but yeah, let's carry on to the Q&A.
And thank you for those in the chat who I saw translating some of what I said. The get ready with me, some of the little internet speak stuff. I appreciate y'all helping me out on that one.
Raise your hand if you have a question. Jack, you
Oh,
feel free to pick
oh, and do you
wherever.
just want to go ahead and call on people who are because
Okay,
you
I
can
can I
see
can
who's
do it.
raised
Yeah.
first. Yeah.
All right, we'll do a young Dem first. Dorian.
Hey, thanks, Gio. And Jack, thanks so much for that informative presentation. Really, really great stuff. So my question is, we've been hearing a lot about podcasts,
Mhm.
right? Folks, hopping onto the circuit or starting their own. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on the utility of that, whether that's an effective strategy that we should pursue moving forward, or if maybe we're a little bit too much on our back foot in that regard.
Yeah, I think it's something that's incredibly important. And one thing that I'll say, speaking to the podcasting of it all, is some people view this as kind of a one-off. You go on, you have a conversation, that's the end of it. But what's so important is that these folks who are a little bit apolitical, right? Some of them, again, like I said, in the MAGA space, try to present themselves as moderate. But Kamala Harris went on plenty of podcasts. She went on Call Her Daddy, which is Alex Cooper's podcast. She went on Shannon Sharp's podcast. What's so good about those shows is that it's an opportunity for much like a stump speech to get clipped and shared in spaces that aren't really traditional for us. So what was so successful about Trump's appearance on Joe Rogan's podcast isn't that just that it got, the millions of views that it did on YouTube, but there are people who actually make money cutting up those clips of Joe Rogan's podcast, no matter who is the guest, and sharing them all across social media. So it's this very easy, free, earned media for Democrats. If they go on, they appear on those shows. Pete Buttigieg went on the Flagrant podcast, which is the comedian. Oh gosh, and now his name is escaping me. Um, Oof, if I could just
Andrew
remember.
Schultz.
Andrew Schultz, thank you so much. So he went on his podcast, and not only did it get millions of views, and I scrolled through all of those comments because I wanted to see them of people saying, "Wow, I'm not a Democrat, but Pete Buttigieg presenting a lot of great ideas. This is all very interesting." But then I covered it, and Midas Touch covered it, and Brian Tyler Cohen covered it, and I think Fox did a segment on it, and there were plenty of people who were not only engaging with it and then watching it, but repurposing it for their own content. So it just goes even farther, and I think that's what's so important is that when we're just given the normal speech before Congress, stuff's on C-SPAN. Sure, I'm going to cut it up, and Brian Tyler Cohen's going to cut it up, and we're going to share it with our audiences. But it's the trickle down that happens after Democrats appear on those shows that I think is so important for reaching audiences who, again, just maybe won't bump into our stuff all the time. And I also think we've got great ideas. We're doing great work. Why not go and talk about it? Why not go and practice? I think it's super important. I think more Democrats need to be doing it. Now, starting their own podcast, I don't know because I don't know how far they're actually going to go. I don't know what the viewership, what the reach is going to be. If you just enjoy hanging out and talking to some folks an hour every week, that's fine. Hopefully, in Gavin Newsom's case, maybe like less Charlie Kirk and Steve Bannon. What I think is more important is to go to those spaces, right? We don't need to bring conservatives into our spaces. They already dominate such a saturated media environment, anyways. We need to be going on their shows and bringing our ideas. So I think it is a totally worthwhile endeavor, not just because it's great to tap into those audiences, but the benefit just keeps on going after you do it.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate that.
Of
And
course.
Dorian's our Long Beach Young Democrats president.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Up next,
LACYD Region 4 representative, Assembly District delegate as well. So we're in it.
Absolutely. Awesome.
up next, our DNC member Deborah Cunningham Skirnick.
Good evening, everyone. I wanted to come because this is probably the social media is where I lack. I can do Facebook and little things like that, but I want to learn how to connect everything to get my message across and other Democrats. Some of the good things that are happening in the DNC right now is Ken Martin's doing a fabulous job of trying to shake things up and do it better, including he is talking more about getting into the spaces that you were just talking to get our messages out, to recruit Democrats to run in all races and things like that. He's also increased the amount of money he is giving to each state each month, what I think will also help. But I think one area we do need to focus more on our rural communities. A number of years ago, I joined the Rural Caucus, and what I've learned is they're the things they need are a little different than ours, but we do cross over. A couple of weeks ago, I went to Imperial County to the Central Committee meeting. They have over only 120,000 people that live in this community, but they're being severely impacted by the tariffs because they're right on the border. And they were reporting about small businesses struggling, people that work back and forth to each country. So I think that would be very helpful in some way. And maybe you can let me know more how we can reach out to the rural communities.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that's why I think social media organizing is so important. And, in a lot of these algorithms, especially when you're paying for advertising, you can be very targeted in the communities that you're trying to reach. But, like I said, these are often audiences of folks who just may not be interacting with their politics that much. It's just something that, again, that they kind of bump into. And they're more likely to when it's entertainment that they're consuming that features a bit of politics. And so that's, again, going back to that podcasting point, why I think it's so important for us to be talking about a lot of these things, because really there's still so many folks who just don't understand what the effects of tariffs are going to be. They don't understand that it's a tax on consumers. They don't understand, that we have empty ports and ships aren't coming in or they're turning around, and Americans are not only being impacted by higher prices, but they're losing markets that they are able to sell their products. And so the overwhelming number of jobs in this country that are created or exist are because of small businesses, and they're being impacted the most. So again, all of this is a message that we can carry victory on social media, as long as we make sure that we're working around the clock to hammer home that the economic victories that we saw in the last couple of years are because of Joe Biden and they're going away because of Donald Trump. And it's Democrats who are consistently better on economic issues. That's something that I just can't stand hearing over and over and over again, that people are voting for Republicans because of the economy. We need to reshape that narrative. And part of it is just long-term hammering home in as many spaces and as many times and as many places as we can that Democrats are the ones who see success when they're in the presidency. And we need to make sure that people recognize that. And so again, it just kind of takes this long-term process of making sure that we stay on top of our messaging, that we're very clear. And although I think it's important for people to use their most authentic and unique voice, but kind of hammer home the same message. That's something that we've been really working on a lot. And I work with a couple of different organizations that kind of try to connect creators so we can make sure that we're saying the same thing and pushing the same narrative, because it's something that the right does really well and that we definitely need to be working on, is that we're staying on top of the same message so people hear it over and over again.
Thank you. And up next, UCI Democrats, Frank Granda.
Yes, thank you. First, thank you, Jack. Thank you for hosting this lovely event. Sorry, I couldn't turn my face right now. I'm actually actually like walking commute, heading to my college dance meeting. But anyway, what I want to ask you is, because considering about how essentially do we kind of like build like our infrastructure for for college students, considering for at least like the Democrats, because considering that you have the infrastructure from like the propaganda machine built by Trump. They also have like the mainstream media, which is just like falling for it. And meanwhile, sure, Dems have their own media, so especially progressive have their own media that's like all scattered to the wind. It's not really like organized. There's not really like like tight infrastructure you see from these other machines. So the one thing I want to ask, how do you essentially like help build this sort of like infrastructure to build like the media machine that we need to essentially get our message out there? Because we have the ideas, but we don't have a platform to present essentially these ideas. So how do we essentially get that established?
Yeah, I think part of it is where we put our money, right? I'm someone who grew up in Florida, and there has been so much investment in conservative talk radio, especially in South Florida, that has paid huge, huge dividends. And something that Ro Khanna said to me once is that is really stuck with me. It's like, when it comes to when we get really close to election season, we're giving our money to all these people who clearly do not like us. We're giving it to Google. We're giving it to Facebook. It's like, why are we doing that? Why are we not spending money year round investing in folks who are going to be able to carry our message, so that ultimately we're not relying on Facebook and Zuckerberg to do it when it comes to election season? So I think that making sure that we have a very targeted effort of investing in creators, investing in organizations who are building this infrastructure is very, very important. We just had a campaign that spent over $1 billion. And I think if we took some of that money and made sure we were investing in people long term, that is going to be way more important. People want to get their news from people now. We don't have any institutional trust in anywhere except for, I think the last institution in America that's really got great trust in it is the national parks, and Donald Trump is trying to defund them, right? So we need to make sure that the folks who people come to for their news have the ability to do that year round. And I'm actually working with an organization right now called Chorus that is focused not only on educating creators who are up and coming, but making sure that there is no impediments to them doing their job all year round. We want to make sure that we are bringing in investment from people who would write checks to Democratic campaigns so that they can take some of that money, which of course we want to spend to help people get out in the field and organize. But I think, in my personal opinion, TV ads, sometimes they're a waste of money, especially when we're kind of spending millions. Wouldn't we rather be much targeted in very specific areas with creators who are of the community and state that they are talking about? Isn't that a much better way to move forward, especially when we're building that democratic infrastructure, that media infrastructure everywhere? So that's something that I think we need to be seeing more of. We need to be pushing on our leaders to drive investment to kind of smaller places rather than, big institutions or giant TV ad buys or consultants who are probably taking too much. We need to invest in the creators who are going to be doing this work because they love it, but can do it better if they have support behind them. And it's another reason that I've been telling members of Congress as much as they can to do more collabs with, with college Democrats, with young creators, with anyone, really, because you can bring a certain level of legitimacy to these spaces as an elected Democrat. Republicans have been doing it all the time. And I'll really say this point, so much of this, unfortunately, is vanity. Like there are so many podcasters or people in just kind of online spaces who got so excited at the idea, and I don't know why, considering the person that he is, of being able to interview Donald Trump or talk to him or have, RFK come to the gym and lift with a bunch of guys. They got excited about that, and so they decided, just because those people engaged with them, that they would completely follow behind them. And so I tell folks, go out and speak to people everywhere, every place, especially online. Just the smallest bit of interaction goes so, so far. If we're going to be knocking doors, absolutely, we should also be like knocking on people's DMs and trying to make these collaborations happen. Unfortunately, I wish it wasn't the case that so many of these people with big platforms, with so many people listening to them, couldn't be so easily swayed by just like, a nice invitation or like a podcast appearance. But that's kind of the way it is. But Democrats have to understand that and work around it.
Thank you. Yeah. Now we have to hit the gym with Jack. I think that's the up next, California Democratic Party Regional Director Jeff Hortson.
Hey, Jack. First, I was listening to a podcast this weekend who also said we need to stop calling it a tariff, call it an import tax, because that's exactly what it is. And that's using the words that people actually use every day. The question that I have, I was at an event up in rural Northern California, and it wasn't until I left that I realized I didn't go online. I didn't post any picture. I didn't take any pictures. How do I make sure that I remember to do those things? Because, I mean, if I had actually posted from that location in Northern California, I know that it would have gotten traction within that community. Because, hey, here's somebody from the California Democratic Party that came to our event, and, but it would have been a good thing had I
Yeah.
remembered.
What I'd say to that is I wouldn't say have someone to like hold you accountable, but what I've been stressing to different members of Congress is if you're interacting, especially on Instagram or Twitter, with other electeds in the caucus, the algorithms are going to push it for you, right? I've been telling people if you comment below, someone's tweet and that gets a bunch of likes, that is instructive to this Twitter algorithm that your post should come up in more people's feeds, right? Collaborating and engagement with just different accounts is a good thing. So what I'd say is find someone else and don't just think, okay, so how can I make this a good social media moment? However big your following is, however big or small, it doesn't matter. But have someone that you want to share what they shared, that you want to engage with what they posted, you want to talk with them about what happened in that meeting, wherever you may be. Have other people that you're engaging with online in the same way that you would in person, because it's just going to make those posts, it's just going to make whatever you share go farther. So I'd say always find a way to interact and engage with someone else in the same way that you would if you were at an event and you just wanted to make an intro with someone. It is the same game online, and it's just a way to make things go further. So that would be my point for that.
If I could just add one thing real quick
Yeah.
to the end there. When I was at the event, one of the things they asked me is, "Hey, we've been trying to get younger people here. What can we do?" And I was like, "Go where they are." And there was a 24-year-old that I walked up to and I said, "Hey, they had this question. What do you think?" And she said the exact same thing. She said, "Where's your presence? I mean, you keep posting to Facebook." She said, "My friends are not on Facebook."
Yeah.
She said, "My friends are on TikTok, my friends are on Instagram," and listed several other sites that they just weren't on. So we definitely need to, you know, we need to work with our central committees to make sure they understand to reach the people that we're actually going where the young people are.
Yeah, and empower them. Give people the
Yeah.
opportunity. Young folks want to get involved. I was just talking with Anderson Clayton, who's the youngest chair of a state Democratic Party in the country. And there are so many young people who are showing up to events for the North Carolina Dems because they see themselves in her and they see the ability to engage with these organizations. And so, if we're just instructive of the thing we want, if we just show like, hey, young people, if you show up, you will be elevated. You will have the ability to work and succeed and make change. More people are going to come. So I definitely think that's a part of it as well. Obviously, y'all are doing a great job with that.
Yeah, love Anderson Clayton. And central committees are what we call our voting bodies for county parties here. That's what Jeff was referring to. Um, Up next, Zenon.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on, Jack. I had a quick question. What do you think of the merits of social media for communications versus organizing? I think that I found that in terms of social media as a platform for persuasion can be effective for sure, but it definitely does not result in as many turnouts for an actual event compared to traditional just calls, texts, all the rest. Have you seen that there's maybe a different way to be doing messaging to be if you're trying to focus on turnout uh, to be approaching it from that direction? And or do you think social media's strength more so is in that persuasion aspect?
Yeah, I think that sometimes the channels by which we get people to organize aren't the best. Sometimes you're creating huge group chats that no one wants to pay attention to, or just going to turn off the notifications or eventually leave. Or sometimes you're doing it in a little bit too much of the boutique way, like I'm just putting a link on my story, but no one's really going to click that. So I think it's really just about assigning individuals the ability to engage in outreach. Because if you're doing it at a way too small or way too big level, sometimes it just doesn't create the result that you want. What I've had most of my success with is just being very deliberate and empowering other people to go about organizing a couple of folks and then having them bring in a couple more folks. I feel like when you're doing posts in mass, sometimes it's difficult, but it's also about the channels that you're going through. So I definitely say that, if you're trying to organize folks on Instagram, creating like a little community channel that you can have, which is just kind of a giant, a big group chat where you can send information, but other people aren't engaging as well, so it doesn't get too full. It is the best way to do that. Twitter has really suppressed anyone's ability to do any real type of organizing in mass unless you're paying for it, which makes it difficult. But I think it's just about empowering specific individuals. I think, someone coming from the persuasion side, I may not be able to give you the best answer on that. But I think it's just about finding which app wants to do what. This is something that I've had to communicate and think about a lot is, Instagram, if you wanted to share a YouTube video that you did, this is a really interesting thing to think about with Instagram and all these social platforms is how do they want me to engage with them? If you put a link to, let's say you just started a YouTube channel and you wanted people to check out your first video, you go and click that link on someone's story and it doesn't take you to YouTube. It takes you to a YouTube page within Instagram where you're not signed in, you can't comment, you can't like, because it wants to restrict your access to that. Because if it just sent you to YouTube, you'd be leaving Instagram. And Instagram does not want you to leave Instagram. So you kind of have to work around that and think about the ways of like, okay, if I'm trying to organize on this platform, how do I do it in a way that the platform wants me to, right? So sometimes you have to think about like, what does Instagram want me to do? And then let me focus on how I can organize around it. So that would kind of be the advice or the thought process that I'd give there. Persuasion is more my side of things. So I'd have to get back to you on that, maybe talk to someone with a little bit of different expertise. But I'm always thinking about what do these platforms want me to do and how can I use that understanding to succeed in what I want to do? Of
That's great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
course.
Thank you. And Orange County Young Democrats, Ryan Pham.
Hey, how's it going? Thank you so much for being here. Ryan, I'm with the OC Young Dems. First and foremost, yeah, thank you so much for being here. Second on Gio's point, agree with the gym. Just hitting RDLs earlier today, killing it. Love leg day. My question to you, Jack, is regarding trolling. So I've been on the internet. I was raised on the internet, and
Yep.
one thing that you know on the internet is everyone loves trolling. And with our social media, we always get right-wing comments that love to just troll on our page. What do you find is the best? It's like the most effective way to combat that. One thing that I mean, me personally, I don't mind trolling back, but like, what have you found to be more effective?
I think it's fun to engage with them sometimes if they're not like a little too crazy and hateful. Some of them are. What I'd say that is it's an important thing to consider there is any type of engagement, no matter what people say, these platforms usually read it as the same, which is engagement. So sometimes getting conservatives really upset with you often boosts your post to your audience. So that's totally fine. But I don't think that there's necessarily a problem with responding to people and kind of mocking them. That's a lot of what I did early on Twitter is I would just like reply and fact check conservatives and then, like take a picture of that, whatever elected Republican it was. I had a lot of fun with this. Or I guess it wasn't that fun. I was just upset at the hypocrisy around student loan forgiveness with all these Republicans who had their PPP loans forgiven. And I was just posting the number of how much they had forgiven below their tweet. So I think it's a good thing to do. One thing that I definitely say is if it's something that's happening so consistently that like now you're asking me about it, it seems like it might be. Come up with a collection of one of your favorites or some of your favorites. I've been in the YouTube space for a little bit of time now, and it hasn't just been doing my channel. I had a friend who I helped kind of grow his, which taught me a lot of this game. And we made a video just about all the mean things that people had written in, just angry Republicans, and it got hundreds of thousands of views. It's something I tell members of Congress, be combative. People love that kind of dynamic. So honestly, if it's happening that much, just take advantage of it, have some fun with it, and if you have to, block people. It's the best advice I can give for social media mental health. Never be afraid to block people. But if they're fun and they're just annoyed and it's hilarious to respond to them, then use it. It's engagement and it's good.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Up next in Los Angeles, Max.
Hey, Jack. Thanks so much for doing this and being here. You mentioned the importance of speaking into a camera often and speaking the language that comes naturally to us, but also the importance of like staying disciplined and being on message across the platform or across multiple voices. I'm just curious, like, what the best approach you think is to kind of do both of those things. We can respond to what's going on daily while also like continuing like to be disciplined and send the same message with some of those big issues that really matter.
Yeah, I think for me, and this is, when I bring it up to folks on the Hill and their staff, a lot of the message discipline isn't so much as saying the same sentence when sometimes saying the same sentence is a really good thing. If we decide that what we figured out is that calling it an import tax rather than a tariff is better, which I personally think it is. It is an import tax, and as I, freaked out when Amazon decided to take that little number away, you know, tariffs, like them or not, and I do not, the point is to demonstrate that the purchasing of foreign goods rather than domestic is more expensive, so people buy the domestic good. So the idea that they'd want to take away what would lead people to buy in theory, although they want more domestic goods, is ridiculous. Now I'm getting off track here. But part of messaging discipline for me is understanding I have a message, it works. Now let's put it everywhere all the time. It's something that I've said to members is like if you go and you give a great floor speech, you do a great 1 minute, take that minute, post it on Twitter, post it on Instagram, post it on TikTok, post it on YouTube, and then also write up what that message means. And then share that on Facebook. Take a screenshot of it, of the tweet, put it on Instagram, but put it wherever you can. A lot of message discipline for me isn't just about saying the same thing. That's important. But if you find your own creative and comfortable way to say it that you think breaks through a little bit more, absolutely do it. It's about what you do with that message once you've figured out what it is that kind of means so much more to me is just hammer it home everywhere you possibly can. I think that's the step we miss a lot of times when we figure out, oh, this really works. Now I'm done with it. It's like, no, no, no. Keep hammering it home. Share it everywhere you possibly can. I think that's the step that we sometimes miss. It's like, we're at the 90-yard line, or this would be the 10-yard line. It's like we've got 90 yards and we just need to punch it in.
Yeah, thank you. And if other folks have questions, feel free to raise your hand. I do have a question myself.
Go
Uh,
for it.
as Democrats, we really believe in the issues. Like we believe in policy. We really always want to discuss the substance of it, the truth of it. But a lot of times, like the Republicans would do things that are like they might be lying. They might be giving people nicknames. They might do fiery things, right? Things that really catch attention, especially when we're just scrolling and sometimes our attention spans aren't the best and all that. How do you feel that we should combat that while sticking to our values?
Yeah, I think it's totally fine for us to have a little bit more spice, a little bit more fire, a little bit of punchback in the way that we're communicating. I think people like it. I think people want it. Um, I think the best example I can give of this, and I don't know I don't know how comfortable everyone is with the language that I might be about to use, is that, myself and Brian Tyler Cohen, we, well, like I said, I've been speaking on the Hill a lot, and part of the presentation that we gave was about instructing members of Congress to be okay if they want to swear. Go for it. If you're totally fine with it, you should. If you feel that it's natural, you should. Some people can't, though. We had one Democratic member of Congress who even said, as she was about to say the thing that she did, "Oh, I'm not that comfortable with swearing, but I'm going to anyways." And then she said, "We have to F Trump," and instead of saying like Trump can F off. And I was just like, "You're clearly not that comfortable with swearing if you're saying that we have to F Trump." And I was like, "That's not what you meant to say. Don't do it." It just goes back to the authenticity and comfortability thing. Like what you're comfortable with, you should do. Like what you're not, you shouldn't. And if you don't feel that comfortable, you don't have to all the time. Like, I think that everyone should be on social media and engaging with it as long as they can, right? And if you can't, then figure out what your other niche is. But it is totally okay, in my opinion, and in fact, encouraged to fight back with the same sort of rhetoric that they do. Again, when Republicans get all mad at it, because I think we saw a Democrat today tell the Daily Caller, I can't remember who it was, to F off, and they get all mad at that. But like I said, the image of my mind that I always keep coming back to when it's like, ooh, a Democratic scandal and what they said is like Jasmine Crockett on Fox, right? Every other week or every week or almost every day they're playing some clip where it's like, oh no, what did Jasmine Crockett say next? And it's just her passionately communicating our message. So if that's the worst thing that can happen when you open your mouth is they put you on Fox for angrily talking about Republicans wanting to take away Social Security, that's a huge win to me.
No, absolutely. And this might be a little counter to what we're talking in the training too, but obviously we want to encourage folks to use social media. We want to counter what the Republicans are saying and all that. But also we're seeing a big discourse on like mental health now. Schools are starting to ban phones and that sort of thing. I find myself getting really angry when I'm seeing all the horrible stuff Trump is doing on my phone.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on like social media and mental health?
I have a terrible relationship with it, obviously. I cover this stuff all the time. Um, that's a difficult question for someone whose job this is and someone who I want to be covering it all the time. Because honestly, more often than I'm thinking about kind of how I feel about it, I'm just kind of thinking about how the people who I'm talking to, how I can make them feel better about it all. Um, I definitely think that there's ways to certainly separate yourself from it. But the best thing that's happened lately is really just the huge, fighting oligarchy tour. I think that recognizing that in some of our pushback to the administration that we still have agency and there's still lots and lots of us out there fighting is an important thing to keep in mind. That's really what reminds me of why we're doing this a lot. Aside from the fact that we'd like to keep this country that we've created and that we've had for so long now, but recognizing that there's other people out there. When there's a post with 40,000 likes or you're on a live stream with 20,000 people, sometimes it's difficult to remember what that looks like. But if you want to remember, go watch AOC and Bernie. Like you can see all those people out there. There's the same people who are here tonight that are all a part of this same fight together. And to remember the community of it all, it makes me feel a little bit better, which again is difficult when you feel so concerned and worried all the time. Yeah, and the chaos is real. I talk about this a lot on my show that Republicans, kind of frame the chaos of Trump, at least on the campaign trail and for most of his time in politics, is they always just call it like mean tweets. This, oh, the liberals, they get mad about the mean tweets. And it's like, well, the mean tweets are, Pete Hegseth sharing war plans. Like that's what they call mean tweets. That's something that puts you in danger. When Donald Trump is saying he'll defy the Supreme Court and then defying the Supreme Court, that's not a mean tweet. That's undermining the rule of law in this country, which makes other nations not want to invest. If America is an unstable place to do business, other countries won't do business. And that ultimately makes things more expensive in America. If other countries won't buy our bonds, borrowing becomes more expensive. It becomes more difficult to buy a house, to get a car, to pay off a credit card. Donald Trump's chaos does affect us all. Now, you asked about mental health, and now I feel like I'm bringing the mood down here, but it is important to remember that everything that we're calling out is with purpose. Sometimes I feel like a lot of folks want to call things distractions, and maybe, sure, some are. But it is important that we continue to understand we have agency and organizing power in everything that we do, and that there's community in these actions. And that's why we do this all. Politics is about people, it's about community, and we still have power.
Well, thank you so much, Jack, for joining us. Hopefully, we can get you to California. We have a convention next month. I mean,
I'm
this end
hoping
of this
that would be
month.
great. I was maybe gonna come to see the Lakers play, but that has not worked out perfectly for me to go visit for a playoff game. So maybe I can find a different reason to get out there. I love LA, I love California, and I love the work that y'all are doing. I'm so glad everyone was able to join this call. It really means a lot to have some people come and listen to me, might share my thoughts on social media, and I appreciate all the work that y'all are doing. It really does mean a lot.
No, absolutely, Jack, and thank you so much for joining us. I think all of us really learned a lot from this training, and we have it recorded. So for the folks that miss, we'll post it on YouTube.
Awesome. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's go, Democrats.